The cold metal felt strange against Jake Harrison's skin as he pushed open the hibernation pod. His body moved slowly, like he was swimming through thick water. Everything hurt. His muscles screamed as he tried to sit up. The air tasted old, and recycled. Jake looked around the huge underground room. Thousands of empty pods stretched out in rows as far as he could see. Most of them were dark and silent. Only a few still glowed with soft blue light. He was alone in a room that once held the last hope of humanity. His memory came back in pieces. The war, the aliens, the fire falling from the sky, Earth burning, his wife and children dying in the first attack, the choice to sleep forever, hoping someone would wake him when it was safe to fight back. A voice spoke from speakers hidden in the walls. It sounded like a woman, calm and friendly. "Welcome back, Commander Harrison. You have been asleep for 502,847 years. I am Helen, your artificial intelligence caretaker." Jake tried to speak, but only made a croaking sound. His throat was too dry. Helen must have understood because water started flowing from a tube near his pod. He drank greedily, feeling life return to his body. "Where are the others?" Jake finally managed to ask. "Dr. Amy Richardson and Captain Ben Morris are waking up in the medical bay. They will join you shortly. All other pods failed during the long sleep. You three are the last of the original survivors." Jake felt a crushing weight settle on his chest. 3 people. Out of 8 billion, only 3 remained from the old world. He had known this might happen, but the reality hit him like a physical blow. He forced himself to stand and walk. His legs shook, but they held him up. The underground facility was massive. Lights turned on as he moved through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. The walls were smooth metal, and the air hummed with the sound of machines working. After 20 minutes of walking, Jake found the medical bay. 2 other pods were open. A woman with short brown hair was sitting on a bed, flexing her fingers and testing her movements. A tall man with gray hair was doing push-ups on the floor, his body already strong despite just waking up. "Amy Richardson," the woman said when she saw Jake. She had been Earth's top expert on alien biology before the war. "I remember you from the briefings. You were the one who suggested we target their supply lines instead of their fleets." The man doing push-ups stood up and extended his hand. "Ben Morris. I commanded the 3rd Fleet during the Battle of Jupiter. Not that it mattered much in the end." Jake shook their hands. These people had been heroes in the old war, but they had still lost. Everyone had lost when the aliens came. "Helen, show us what happened while we slept," Jake said. The walls around them changed into giant screens. Images flowed past showing the construction of massive underground cities, space stations being built in secret, and ships taking shape in hidden shipyards. Jake watched in amazement as robots and machines worked for thousands of centuries, following plans made by humans who are now dust. "The automated systems never stopped working," Helen explained. "They built new facilities throughout the solar system and beyond. They studied the enemy and developed new weapons. Most importantly, they created new humans." Amy leaned forward. "What do you mean, new humans?" "Genetic modifications were made to your DNA before hibernation. You are stronger, faster, and smarter than baseline humans. Your lifespans have been extended to over 1,000 years. These same modifications were used to create colonists who have been living in secret bases throughout the galaxy." Jake felt different now that Helen mentioned it. His vision was sharper. He could hear conversations happening in distant rooms. His mind processed information faster than before. The changes felt natural, like they had always been there. "How many new humans are there?" Ben asked. "Approximately 50 million live in hidden colonies on the outer rim of the galaxy. They have been raised knowing the truth about Earth's destruction. They have been trained as soldiers from birth. They are waiting for your orders. The three original humans looked at each other. 50 million. It was a tiny number compared to Earth's old population, but it was an army. An army that had been preparing for revenge for 500,000 years. What about the aliens who attacked us? Jake asked. The Zephyrian Confederation? Images of alien worlds filled the screens. Cities that stretched across entire continents. Fleets of ships that darkened the sky. Massive industrial complexes that consumed whole planets. The Zephyrian Confederation now controls 3,000 star systems. They believe humanity is extinct. Their technology has remained largely unchanged due to overconfidence. They have enslaved dozens of other species and strip-mined hundreds of worlds. Their society is built on the assumption that no one can challenge them. Jake felt something burning in his chest. It was not anger exactly, but something deeper and more focused. The genetic modifications had done more than make him stronger. They had given him purpose, coded into his very DNA. They kept human slaves, Amy said, studying the data flowing across the screens. Look at these population records. Humans still exist throughout their territory. Ben was examining military data. Their fleets are spread thin. They rule through fear, but their actual military strength is weaker than it appears. We could hurt them if we struck at the right targets. Jake walked to the center of the room. Helen, show us our military assets. The screens changed to show something that took Jake's breath away. In the empty space between galaxies, a massive fleet hung in the darkness. Thousands of ships unlike anything that had existed during the Old War. They were sleek and deadly, built with technology that combined human innovation with alien science. The Terran Resurrection Fleet, Helen said, built over the last 200,000 years using materials gathered from across the galaxy. The ships are invisible to Zephyrian sensors and armed with weapons that exceed their capabilities by several orders of magnitude. Amy whistled softly. How did the automated systems manage to build all this without being detected? Patience and careful planning. The construction took place in areas the Zephyrians never visit. Materials were gathered slowly over millennia. The crews are all new humans who have been training their entire lives for this moment. Jake studied the fleet data. Each ship was a masterpiece of engineering. The smallest vessels carried more firepower than the old Earth battleships. The largest could destroy planets. But what impressed him most was the careful thought behind their design. These were not just weapons of war, but tools for building a new civilization. They made one mistake, Ben said, still analyzing the enemy data. They let some of us live as slaves. That means they have living proof that humanity survived. We can use that. More than that, Amy added, look at these biological scans. The other species in their confederation are not willing allies. They are controlled through genetic manipulation and terror. We could turn them against their masters. Jake felt the pieces of a plan forming in his mind. The old humanity had fought the aliens with honor and lost. The new humanity would fight with intelligence and patience. They would not just defeat their enemies, they would liberate everyone the aliens had enslaved. Helen, can you contact the fleet commanders? Yes, Commander Harrison. They have been waiting for your awakening for over a century. Shall I open communications? Jake looked at Amy and Ben. Both nodded. They were ready to begin the long road back to the stars. Ready to settle the score that had been waiting for 500,000 years. Open the channel, Jake said. It's time to let the galaxy know that humanity has returned. Jake Harrison stood in the command center 3 days after waking up. The room was enormous, filled with screens showing star maps and data streams from across the galaxy. He still felt strange in his enhanced body, but he was getting used to the new strength and speed. Amy Richardson worked at a console nearby, studying genetic data that scrolled past faster than any normal human could read. Her modified brain processed the information like a computer, finding patterns and connections that would have taken teams of scientists years to discover. Ben Morris paced near the tactical displays, his eyes tracking ship movements and supply. Routes throughout Zephyrian space. Even after sleeping for 500,000 years, he still moved like a soldier ready for battle. The scope of this is incredible, Amy said without looking up from her work. Helen, show us the Luna facilities. The main screen switched to images of the moon. But this was not the dead rock Jake remembered from before the war. The entire surface was covered with industrial complexes and shipyards. Massive structures stretched from pole to pole, all of them hidden beneath camouflage that made them invisible to any outside observer. The Luna shipyards have been producing vessels for 300,000 years, Helen explained. The stealth technology incorporated into each ship makes them undetectable by current Zephyrian sensors. The weapons systems are based on captured alien technology, but improved through human innovation. Jake watched as the images showed ships being built. They were beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Sleek hulls that seemed to bend light around them. Weapon arrays that could level cities. But what impressed him most was the careful design. Every line and curve served a purpose. How many ships are ready? Ben asked. 12,000 vessels of various classes are currently operational. Another 8,000 are in final construction phases. The fleet is crewed by volunteers from the hidden colonies. Amy pulled up another display. Speaking of the colonies, we need to see the genetic archive. The screens changed to show a vast underground chamber filled with millions of storage containers. Each one glowed with soft light, containing the preserved DNA of every species that had lived on Earth before the war. This is more than just preservation, Amy said, her voice filled with wonder. They have been improving the genetic templates for hundreds of thousands of years. Every plant, every animal, every microorganism has been enhanced while maintaining its essential nature. Jake studied the data flowing past. You mean they can bring back Earth's ecosystem, but make it better? Not just better, stronger, more resistant to damage, more capable of surviving in different environments. When we retake Earth, we can restore it to something more beautiful than it ever was. Helen added more information. The genetic modifications extend beyond Earth species. The new human populations have been given enhanced capabilities while retaining full humanity. They are not a different species, but an improved version of the original. Ben was looking at star charts showing the locations of human colonies. 50 million people spread across hundreds of worlds. How did they stay hidden for so long? Careful selection of locations and advanced camouflage technology. The colonies were established in star systems that the Zephyrians considered worthless or too dangerous to explore. Many are located in nebulae or near unstable stars where normal sensors cannot penetrate. Jake traced the locations on the map. They formed a rough circle around the galaxy's outer edge, positioned perfectly to strike at Zephyrian supply lines when the time came. Someone had planned this very carefully. Show us one of the colonies, he said, the screen filled with images of a world that took Jake's breath away. Rolling green hills stretched to the horizon under a golden sun. Cities built from white stone rose from valleys filled with gardens. But these were not the crowded, polluted cities of old Earth. These settlements worked with the natural landscape, instead of fighting against it. This is Colony 7, known to its inhabitants as New Eden, Helen said. Population 800,000. The people live in harmony with their environment while maintaining advanced technology. They have been preparing for this day since childhood. Jake watched people moving through the city streets. They looked human, But there was something different about them. They moved with grace and purpose. Even the children seemed more alert and aware than normal kids should be. They know about us, Amy observed. Look at their faces. They are waiting for something. As if responding to her words, the image changed to show a large gathering in the city center. Thousands of people were assembled around a massive screen. On that screen was a woman in military uniform, speaking to the crowd. That is Captain Elena Garcia, Helen said. She leads the colonial military forces. She has been coordinating with the automated systems to prepare for your awakening. Jake leaned forward to listen as Helen increased the audio. The time of waiting is nearly over, Elena was saying. Our ancestors sleep beneath the ice of Earth, but they will wake soon. When they do, we will no longer hide in the shadows. We will reclaim our birthright and free every enslaved world in the galaxy. The crowd cheered, but it was not the wild enthusiasm of a mob. These people were disciplined, focused. They cheered like soldiers who knew victory was coming. Ben pointed to groups of people in the crowd. Look at their organization. Even in a civilian gathering, they maintain military structure. These colonists have been raised as warriors. All new humans receive military training as part of their education, Helen confirmed. But they are not just soldiers. They are also scientists, engineers, artists, and philosophers. The goal was to create a complete civilization, not just an army. Amy was studying biological data from the colonies. Their genetic modifications are more advanced than ours. Enhanced intelligence, perfect health, extended lifespans of up to 1,500 years. But they have also retained human creativity and emotion. Jake felt a mix of pride and sadness. These people were his descendants in a way, carrying on humanity's legacy while he slept. But they had grown up without Earth, without the world that had made humanity what it was. They need to see their home, he said quietly. The image changed again, this time showing Elena Garcia in what looked like a command center. She was studying tactical displays that showed Zephyrian fleet movements throughout the galaxy. Captain, Garcia has requested permission to speak with you directly. Holland said. Jake nodded. Open the channel. Alana's image appeared on the main screen. She was younger than Jake had expected, maybe 40 years old, but her eyes held the wisdom of someone who had seen much more. When she saw Jake, she smiled and saluted. Commander Harrison, I am honored to finally meet you. My great-grandmother told me stories about the heroes who sacrificed everything to give us this chance. Captain Garcia, your people have done incredible work. We are impressed by what you have built. We built it for you, sir, for all of you. Every ship, every weapon, every plan has been made with one goal in mind, to bring justice to those who destroyed our home. Ben stepped forward. What is your assessment of enemy capabilities? Elena's expression became serious. The Zephyrians are overconfident and spread thin. They rule through fear, but their actual military strength has not grown significantly. In 200,000 years, they believe themselves invincible because no one has challenged them. That changes now, Jake said. Double quotes, yes, sir. We have identified critical weaknesses in their infrastructure. Their main command center is on Zirion Prime, the Vorthan homeworld. If we can strike there, we can cripple their entire command structure. Amy leaned into the conversation. What about the other species in their confederation? Can they be turned against the Vorthans? Elena smiled grimly. Our intelligence suggests that most species were forced into the confederation against their will. The Vorthans use biological control methods to ensure loyalty. If we can break those controls, we might gain allies instead of enemies. Jake felt the pieces of a larger strategy forming in his mind. This would not be just a war of revenge. but a war of liberation. They would free not just humanity, but every species enslaved by the Zephyrian Confederation. Captain Garcia, prepare your forces. We are going to start with small operations to test enemy responses and gather more intelligence. Understood, Commander. We have been ready for this moment our entire lives. As the communication ended, Jake looked at Amy and Ben. They were no longer just three survivors of an ancient war. They were the leaders of a hidden empire that had been preparing for 500,000 years to reclaim their place in the galaxy. The real war was about to begin. Jake Harrison watched the tactical display as 12 small ships disappeared into hyperspace. Each vessel carried a team of enhanced humans on the most dangerous mission in 500,000 years. They were going deep into enemy territory, not to fight, but to learn and to plant seeds of chaos. Operation Lazarus is now active, Helen announced. All teams have successfully jumped to their target systems. Amy Richardson stood beside Jake, monitoring biological data streaming from the infiltration teams. Each team member wore sensors. That transmitted their vital signs back to Earth. Their enhanced physiology is handling the stress well. Heart rates are elevated but stable. Ben Morris studied fleet movements on another screen. The Zephyrians have no idea we exist. Their patrol patterns have not changed in centuries. They are completely unprepared for this. The first team to reach their target was led by Lieutenant Kate Thompson. Her mission was to investigate the industrial world of Kepler 442b, which had been home to 12 million humans before the war. Now the Zephyrians called it Zephyr 7. Kate's voice came through the communication system, calm and professional despite being alone in enemy space, approaching target world, beginning passive scans. The data that came back made Jake's enhanced heart beat faster. The planet that had once been green and beautiful was now a gray wasteland. Massive mining operations had stripped away entire continents. The oceans were gone, replaced by deep pits that stretched the planet's core. Dear God, Amy whispered. They consumed the entire world. Kate's ship moved closer, using advanced stealth technology to avoid detection. Her sensors picked up the heat signatures of millions of workers in the mining pits. Most were aliens from various species, but the genetic scanners found traces of human DNA among them. There are humans down there, Kate reported, descendants of the original colonists. They have been working in these mines for 500,000 years. Jake felt something dark stirring in his chest. The genetic modifications had not just made him stronger and smarter. They had awakened something primal, a burning need for justice that threatened to consume him. He forced himself to stay calm and focused. Document everything, Kate. We need proof of what they have done. While Kate gathered evidence from the dead world, Sergeant Alex Rivera was conducting his own investigation in the Centauri system. His target was a slave market where different species were bought and sold like animals. Alex had disguised himself as a trader from a minor alien species. His enhanced genetics allowed him to pass basic medical scans, and his training made him convincing. In the role, he walked through markets that sold sentient beings as if they were livestock. The variety of species here is staggering, Alex reported through his hidden communicator. I count representatives from at least 30 different worlds. Most of them looked malnourished and sick. Alex moved through the crowded marketplace, his enhanced senses picking up conversations in dozens of languages. Slave traders argued over prices while their merchandise stood in cages, hopeless and broken. Then he found what he was looking for. In a section marked for primitive species, he discovered humans. Men, women, and children who looked exactly like the original Earth population, but with the hollow eyes of people who had never known freedom. Confirmed human survivors, Alex whispered. At least 200 individuals in this facility alone. They appear to be descendants of colonists. From the outer rim, one of the human slaves, an elderly woman with gray hair, noticed Alex staring. She looked at him with intelligent eyes that seemed to see through his disguise. When the guards were not watching, she whispered something that made Alex's blood run cold. "You are the children of Earth, come to take us home." Alex nearly broke. Character. How could she know? How could she recognize him when he was disguised as an alien traitor? Later, when he was alone, the old woman approached him again. This time she spoke in an ancient dialect of English that had not been used for thousands of years. "We have kept the old stories alive," she said quietly. "Stories of the blue world where humanity was born. Stories of the great sleep and the promise of return. We knew you would come back for us." Alex felt tears in his eyes. These people had maintained their culture and their hope through centuries of slavery. They had passed down stories of Earth from parent to child, keeping alive the dream of freedom. "How? Many of you are there?" he asked in the same ancient dialect. "Millions throughout the galaxy. We are scattered across hundreds of worlds, but we remember. We remember everything." While Alex made contact with the hidden human survivors, Dr. Amy Richardson was working on her most important project. She had been studying samples of Zephyrian biology, looking for weaknesses that could be exploited. What she found was shocking. The 12 species that made up the Zephyrian Confederation were not natural allies. They had been forced together through biological warfare. The Vorthan Empire had created a genetic virus that made other species loyal and obedient. "This is incredible," Amy said, sharing her findings with Jake and Ben. "The Vorthans are not just military conquerors. They are biological manipulators. They have been controlling entire species through genetic modification." Jake studied the biological data. "Can you reverse it?" "I think so. The virus works by suppressing natural aggression and independent thought. If I can create a counter-virus, it might break their control over the subject species." Ben looked up from his tactical displays. "That could change everything. If the other species remember their true histories, they might rebel against Vorthan." Control. Amy worked for days, using her enhanced intelligence to design a biological weapon unlike any that had ever existed. But this weapon would not kill. Instead, it would free minds that had been enslaved for millennia. Meanwhile, the intelligence reports continued to come in from the infiltration teams. Kate discovered that the mining operations were not just about resources. The Zephyrians were systematically destroying any trace of the civilizations they conquered. They erased languages, cultures, and histories, leaving nothing behind but broken worlds and enslaved populations. Alex found human communities on dozens of worlds. Each group had maintained their own version of Earth's history, but all of them shared the same core beliefs. Earth was their true home. Humanity would return. Freedom would come. The infiltration teams also discovered critical weaknesses in Zephyrian infrastructure. Their communication networks were ancient and poorly protected. Their supply lines stretched across impossible distances with minimal security. Most importantly, their military leadership had grown complacent after centuries of unchallenged rule. The most important discovery came from Lieutenant Kate Thompson on her third mission. She had infiltrated a Zephyrian military base and gained access to their historical archives. "Jake, you need to see this." Kate's voice was tight with control. "Anger. I found records of the original attack on Earth. Detailed battle plans, casualty reports, everything." The data that came through made Jake's hands shake with rage. The attack on Earth had not been a military necessity. It had been a deliberate act of genocide designed to make an example of humanity. The Zephyrians had targeted civilian populations. First, using weapons designed to cause maximum suffering. But more than that, they had kept detailed records of their victims. Names, faces, personal histories of the billions they had murdered. They had turned the destruction of humanity into entertainment, broadcasting the worst moments to audiences throughout their empire. Amy put her hand on Jake's shoulder as he watched footage of his own family's death. "We will make them pay for this." Jake nodded, but he also felt something else. The human survivors they had found were proof that evil had not won completely. Somewhere in the darkness of slavery and oppression, the light of humanity had continued to burn. "It is time to light a bigger fire," he said. The infiltration phase was complete. The intelligence teams had mapped enemy weaknesses, located human survivors, and planted monitoring devices throughout Zephyrian space. Amy had completed her biological weapon that could free enslaved minds. Most importantly, they had sent a message to every human survivor in the galaxy. The message was simple but powerful. It contained images of Earth as it had been before the war, along with genetic sequences that proved the messengers were legitimate. The message ended with words that had been passed down through generations of slaves. "The children of Earth have come to take you home." Jake stood in the command center as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The message had reached its targets. Human communities that had hidden in slavery for 500,000 years were preparing for freedom. The ghost operations were complete. Now it was time for the real war to begin. The message went out across the galaxy at exactly the same moment. On 3,000 worlds controlled by the Zephyrian Confederation, communication networks suddenly carried a signal that had not been heard for 500,000 years. Jake Harrison stood in the command center watching as the broadcast reached its targets. The message was simple but devastating. It contained historical records of the Great Purge, genetic proof of human survival, and evidence of Vorthan crimes against every species in the galaxy. Humanity remembers. Humanity returns. Humanity judges. The words were spoken in the native languages of all 12 species that made up the Confederation. For many of them, it was the first time in centuries they had heard their original tongues instead of the Vorthan trade language they were forced to use. Amy Richardson monitored the biological effects of her counter-virus as it spread through the communication signals. The virus was hidden in the data stream, designed to break the genetic loyalty bonds that kept the subject species obedient to their Vorthan masters. Neural pattern changes detected across 47 worlds, Amy reported. The loyalty programming is breaking down. They are starting to remember who they were before the Vorthans enslaved them. Ben Morris tracked military responses on his tactical displays. Zephyrian fleets are moving to high alert status. They know something is happening, but they do not understand what. The first signs of rebellion came from the industrial world of Proxima 4. Workers, who had been mining resources for the Vorthan Empire, suddenly stopped their machines and began destroying the equipment they had been forced to operate for generations. Similar uprisings started on dozens of worlds as Amy's virus spread and the broadcast message awakened sleeping memories. Species that had forgotten their own names suddenly remembered their histories, their cultures, and their hatred for their oppressors. But Jake knew that scattered rebellions would not be enough. The Confederation had vast military resources and would crush these uprisings unless humanity provided real support. It was time for the first open military action. Ben, prepare the Liberation Fleet. We are going to free the Tau Ceti slave colonies. Captain Ben Morris smiled grimly. About time. The TSS Retribution is ready for combat. The Terran Liberation Fleet emerged from hyperspace in the Tau Ceti system, like ghosts becoming real. 50 warships appeared without warning around the slave facilities that orbited the system's 3 inhabited worlds. The Zephyrian garrison was caught completely off guard. Their sensors had detected nothing until the human ships were already in firing range. The fleet commander, Admiral Kextar, stared at his displays in disbelief. "Impossible," he snarled. All humans are dead. We killed them ourselves. Ben Morris opened a communication channel to the enemy fleet. His image appeared on every Zephyrian screen in the system. Admiral Kekstar, this is Captain Ben Morris of the Terran Liberation Fleet. You are ordered to surrender immediately and release all slaves in this system. The alien admiral laughed, showing rows of sharp teeth. You are just 50 ships against 200. Surrender now, and we might keep you alive for questioning. Negative, Ben replied calmly. Last chance. Surrender or be destroyed. Admiral Kekstar cut the communication and ordered his fleet to attack. What happened next would be talked about throughout the galaxy for centuries to come. The human ships moved like nothing the Zephyrians had ever seen. They were faster, more maneuverable, and their weapons cut through enemy shields as if they were paper. But more importantly, they fought with precision instead of brute force. Instead of destroying the Zephyrian ships, the human weapons disabled them. Engine systems failed, weapon arrays went offline, and life support systems were damaged just enough to force surrender without killing the crews. Within 20 minutes, the entire Zephyrian fleet was drifting helplessly in space. Not a single enemy ship had been destroyed, but none of them could fight back. This is impossible, Admiral Kekstar whispered as human boarding parties took control of his flagship. Our technology is superior. Our ships are larger. How did you defeat us so easily? Ben Morris appeared on the bridge of the captured vessel. The alien admiral stared at him in shock. Humans were supposed to be primitive creatures, barely capable of spaceflight. But this human radiated confidence and intelligence that made Kekstar feel like a child. You have been fighting the same enemies with the same tactics for 500,000 years, Ben explained. We have been studying you, learning from you, and preparing for this moment. You stopped growing while we never stopped improving. The liberation of the slave facilities revealed the true scope of human survival. On the prison ships and mining platforms, human descendants who had been enslaved for centuries looked up at their rescuers with wonder and disbelief. Mary Davis had been the unofficial leader of the human slaves in the Tau Ceti system. She was 60 years old, but looked ancient from decades of hard labor. When Ben Morris found her in the deepest level of a mining platform, she was teaching human children about Earth, using stories passed down through generations. You came back, she whispered when she saw Ben. The stories were true. Earth's children really came back for us. Ben knelt beside the frail woman. We never forgot about you. We never stopped looking. Mary smiled through her tears. We kept the faith alive. Every night, we told the children about the blue world where humanity was born. We told them that someday, someone would come to take us home. The liberation of Tau Ceti was broadcast throughout human networks across the galaxy. The message was clear. The return had begun. No human would remain enslaved. No crime would go unpunished. But the rescue operations revealed something that broke Jake's heart. The human survivors were not just prisoners of the Zephyrians. They were living libraries, keeping alive the culture and knowledge of lost worlds. Tony Clark had been a resistance fighter on the mining world of Vega 3. For 40 years, he had organized secret meetings where humans shared stories, songs, and traditions from their ancestors. When the Liberation Fleet arrived, he presented them with handwritten books containing everything his people remembered about Earth. We wrote down everything, Tony explained to Jake during their reunion. Every song our grandparents sang, every story about the old world, every prayer we remembered. We knew that someday you would need to know who we were. Jake held the precious books with shaking hands. These people had preserved humanity's soul while he slept. They had kept their culture alive through centuries of oppression, passing down memories like sacred flames. But the liberation also revealed the true extent of Zephyrian brutality. Amy Richardson's medical teams found evidence of genetic experiments, forced breeding programs, and systematic attempts to break human will and identity. They were not just enslaving our people, Amy reported grimly. They were trying to erase what makes us human. They wanted to turn us into a completely different species. The rescued humans also brought intelligence about Zephyrian military capabilities. The slaves had been forced to build weapons and ships for their masters. They knew the weaknesses in every design, the flaws in every system. Their largest ships have a critical vulnerability in the power distribution network, Mary Davis explained during a briefing. If you hit the primary conduit with a focused energy beam, the entire vessel will lose power. This intelligence proved valuable when the Vorthans responded to the Tau Ceti liberation with overwhelming force. A fleet of 500 ships, led by Supreme Admiral Zixthil, arrived in the system ready to recapture the slaves and destroy the human rescuers. But the human fleet was no longer alone. Ships began arriving from across the galaxy as species that had been freed from Vorthan mind control joined the fight for liberation. The Drokari, a proud warrior race that had been enslaved for 200,000 years, brought 40 battle cruisers. The Nexari, master engineers who had been forced to build weapons for their oppressors, arrived with ships that could repair themselves in the middle of battle. "This is Admiral Creva of the Drokari Liberation Fleet," came a transmission on the human communication channels. "We stand with humanity against the Vorthan oppressors." Jake watched as more and more allied ships appeared in the system. Species that had been enemies for millennia were uniting under humanity's banner, not as subjects, but as equals in the fight for freedom. The battle for Tau Ceti would be the first real test of the new alliance. Supreme Admiral Zixthil commanded the largest Zephyrian fleet assembled in centuries. But he would be facing an enemy unlike any his people had encountered before. Jake stood on the bridge of the TSS Vengeance as the enemy fleet prepared to attack. Around him, the faces of his crew showed determination mixed with something deeper. These enhanced humans had been born for this moment, raised on stories of Earth's destruction, and trained to fight for justice. "All ships, prepare for battle," Jake announced. "Today, we begin to settle the score that has been waiting for 500,000 years." The second phase of humanity's return was about to begin. The warning alarms screamed throughout the underground command center as long-range sensors detected the massive fleet emerging from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. Jake Harrison watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. After months of small battles and liberation campaigns, the Vorthans had finally decided to end the human threat once and for all. 10,000 ships, Ben Morris reported from his tactical station. Supreme Admiral Vexthal is commanding from the flagship VCS Dominator. This is the largest fleet they have assembled in over a century. Amy Richardson looked up from her biological monitors. Vexthal was the one who planned the original attack on Earth. He personally supervised the destruction of the cities and the murder of civilians. Jake felt the familiar burning sensation in his chest. The genetic modifications that enhanced his body also carried the encoded memory of humanity's greatest loss. Seeing the name of Earth's destroyer on his screens awakened a hunger for justice that threatened to consume him. "Helen, what is the status of our defensive preparations?" "The Sol Defense Network is fully operational," the AI replied. "Earth's restoration is 70% complete. The planet can now sustain human life, but the ecosystem is still vulnerable." Jake made a decision that surprised everyone in the command center. "We are not going to defend Earth from here. We are going to meet them in open space." Ben raised an eyebrow. "Jake, they outnumber us 5-1. Fighting in open space gives up our defensive advantages." "No," Jake said firmly. "Hiding behind Earth's defenses makes us look weak. We need to show the galaxy that humanity can face any enemy and win." The TSS Vengeance led the human fleet out from Earth's orbit, followed by ships crewed by the descendants of 100 different worlds. The Terran Liberation Fleet had grown during the months of fighting, but it was still vastly outnumbered by the approaching Vorthan Armada. But Jake's fleet was not alone. As they moved toward the outer system, ships began emerging from hyperspace. To join them, the Drukhari brought their entire battle fleet. The Nexari arrived with ships that could repair themselves during combat. Even species that had never fought before came to stand with humanity. Captain Elena Garcia's voice came through the communication system from her flagship. Commander Harrison, the colonial fleets are in position. We have ships standing by in 40 different systems, ready to strike Vorthan supply bases when the battle begins. Jake smiled grimly. This would not just be a battle for Earth. It would be a coordinated attack on Vorthan power throughout the galaxy. Admiral Vixthul watched the approaching human fleet with contempt. These primitive creatures thought they could challenge the might of the Vorthan Empire with their tiny fleet of inferior ships. "Open a communication channel," he ordered. "I want to speak to whoever leads these fools." Jake's image appeared on the main screen of the Vorthan flagship. Vexthul studied the human commander with interest. This creature looked different from the humans he remembered destroying centuries ago. Stronger, more intelligent, more dangerous. "So," Vexthul said with amusement, "the last humans crawl out of hiding to die with their dead world. You should have stayed buried, little creature. At least then your extinction would have been peaceful." Jake's voice was calm and controlled. "Admiral Vexthul, you are responsible for the murder of 8 billion innocent people. You turned living world into a graveyard. Today, you will answer for those crimes." Vexthul laughed, showing rows of sharp teeth. "Answer to whom? You have 3,000 ships against my 10,000. Your allies are weaklings who could not even fight for their own freedom. What makes you think you can defeat me?" "Because we are fighting for something you will never understand," Jake replied. "We are fighting for home." The battle began when the two fleets came within weapons range. But instead of charging directly at the enemy, the human ships scattered in a pattern that confused the Vorthans. Small groups of fast ships darted around the edges of the massive fleet, striking at supply vessels and communication ships. Jake coordinated the battle from the Bridge of the Vengeance. But he was not fighting like the old Earth commanders who had faced the Vorthan centuries ago. This was not a battle of honor or courage. This was a chess game played with starships, and humanity had been studying the rules for 500,000 years. The Vorthan fleet found itself unable to bring its superior numbers to bear. Every time they tried to concentrate their forces, human ships would appear behind them to attack their weakest points. The enhanced humans moved their vessels like extensions of their own bodies, anticipating enemy moves before they were made. Dr. Amy Richardson watched the battle from Earth's command center while coordinating her own part of the plan. As the fleets fought above, she released her biological weapon into space. Microscopic particles carried the Freedom Virus toward the Vorthan ships, designed to break the loyalty programming that controlled their alien crew members. "Genetic liberation protocol is active," Amy announced. "The virus will reach enemy ships in approximately 30 minutes. But the most important part of the battle was happening on Earth itself. While the fleets fought in space, automated systems across the planet were working frantically to complete the Great Restoration. Oceans were being refilled with clean water. Continents were being covered with new forests. The atmosphere was being cleansed of centuries of damage. The planet that had been a dead rock for 500,000 years was coming back to life. Supreme. Admiral Vexthul watched in growing frustration as his massive fleet was slowly torn apart by the smaller human force. These creatures fought like nothing he had ever encountered. They used tactics that seemed to anticipate his every move. How are they doing this? He demanded of his tactical officers. They should not be able to coordinate so precisely across such distances. What Vexthul did not understand was that the enhanced humans were fighting as a single organism. Their modified brains allowed them to share information instantaneously, creating a hive mind that could process tactical data faster than any computer. The tide of battle turned when Amy's virus reached the Vorthan ships. Alien crew members who had been loyal slaves for generations suddenly remembered their true identities. Sabotage broke out throughout the enemy fleet as different species turned against their Vorthan masters. "Sir, we are receiving surrender requests from over 300 enemy vessels," men reported. Their crews have overthrown the Vorthan commanders. Jake felt a moment of satisfaction, but it was interrupted by an urgent warning from Helen. "Commander Harrison, long-range sensors detect a massive energy buildup from the Vorthan flagship. They are charging a planet-killer weapon." Jake's blood ran cold. Vexthul was preparing to destroy Earth completely rather than accept defeat. The weapon building up energy on the Dominator could crack a planet's core and turn it into molten fragments. "All ships, protect Earth at all costs," Jake ordered. "Do not let that weapon fire." But the Vorthan flagship was protected by a screen of loyal ships, and the planet-killer weapon was almost ready to fire. It seemed that even in victory, humanity would lose their home once again. That was when Earth itself joined the battle. The planet that had seemed dead and defenseless suddenly revealed its greatest secret. Hidden beneath the restored continents were massive weapon systems that had been built during the long centuries of preparation. Earth had been turned into the largest fortress in the galaxy. Energy beams erupted from the planet's surface, not to destroy the Vorthan flagship, but to reflect and amplify its own planet-killer weapon back at itself. The blast that was meant to destroy Earth instead consumed the Dominator and Supreme Admiral Vexthul with it. The remaining Vorthan ships surrendered immediately. The war that had lasted 500,000 years was finally over. In the aftermath, Jake stood on the observation deck of a space station orbiting the restored Earth. Below him, the planet was green and blue again, with white clouds drifting over. Continents that were once more covered with forests and grasslands. Captain Elena Garcia joined him at the viewing window. "The Galactic Council has agreed to meet on Earth next month. Representatives from over 200 species want to discuss forming a new government." Jake nodded. "What are they calling it?" "The Terran Republic. A federation based on equality and mutual protection, with Earth as the symbolic capital." Jake thought about the choice that faced humanity. They had the power to become the new galactic empire, to rule through force as the Vorthans had done. The enhanced humans were superior to most species in intelligence and physical capability. They could easily become the new masters of the galaxy. But that was not what they had fought for. "Elena, send a message to all our colonies and allies. We will join the Terran Republic as equals, not as leaders. Humanity has learned the difference between justice and revenge." Elena smiled. "The colonists will be proud. We fought to become liberators, not conquerors." Outside the window, the first transport ships were arriving from the hidden colonies. Millions of humans who had never seen their ancestral home were coming to Earth for the first time. Children who had grown up among the stars would finally walk on the world where humanity was born. But they would not be alone. Ships from dozens of species were also arriving,